Houston in 1873 was a city of extremes, a fast-growing rail and bayou hub still shaped by the post-Civil War years, yet driven by ambition. Commerce clustered along Buffalo Bayou as new rail links pulled people and goods into the city. With a population of about 9,382 in 1870, Houston was rising quickly. Thanks to advanced AI, we can recreate these scenes by studying 19th century bird's-eye maps and lithographs, including the famous 1873 panoramic view. From the street grid to rail depots, bayou landings, storefronts, and daily life, we can step back over 150 years and see Houston as people once did. If you enjoy this journey, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city or era to explore next.
Truly cemented Houston's economic future in the late 19th century.
In 1873, Houston did not need a skyline to look ambitious. It needed an image that made the city feel legible. The bird's eye lithograph, commonly credited to Augustus Koch, offers exactly that. A viewpoint no resident could truly have, as if the viewer were suspended above the flat, humid plain. From that invented height, streets unspool in straight runs and rooftops tilt toward you, creating a city that looks both real and controllable. Panoramic views like this were built from surveys, plats, and local knowledge, then polished into a single sheet meant to be bought, framed, and believed. The grid is the headline. Blocks repeat outward in tidy rectangles, turning open ground into future neighborhoods before they exist. Near the center, denser building clusters hint at a commercial core, while lighter edges imply room for newcomers and fresh subdivisions. The bayou is not scenery, it is the city's working spine. Buffalo Bayou curves through the composition as a transport corridor, and the lines of bridges, yards, and rail approaches signal how Houston expected to move goods. The print lets a distant reader follow an invisible chain. Freight arrives by water, concentrates at landings, reaches streets, then finds the rails that connect Houston to regional markets. In that sense, the lithograph is a 19th century prospectus, an argument that this place can be measured, owned, and expanded without losing coherence. Seen in the 1870s, that persuasion mattered. Houston was no longer just a river town. Rail connections were beginning to reorient trade inland and outward, and printed views helped cities compete for attention in a nation chasing capital. Koch's sheet labels streets and landmarks for a paper tour, and it places warehouses and working yards where they make economic sense. Close to the bayou, close to tracks, close to the grid that simplifies property. The drawing is therefore half inventory, half invitation. It inventories a city that functions, and it invites the viewer to imagine what is not yet built. Even the neat repetition of blocks carries an unstated lesson about governance. A place that can be drawn, this cleanly suggests a place that can be administered, taxed, serviced, and expanded. Yet the lithograph's calm is also a concealment. From above, you cannot hear the shouts at the landing, the scrape of barrels across planks, or the delays when a channel runs shallow. You cannot smell wet timber, cotton dust, or smoke sitting low over the water. The city looks solved because the viewpoint removes friction. And still, the artist quietly directs your eye back toward the bayou's edge, where all that friction lives. If you follow the waterline down from the map's clean geometry, the story tightens into a single working moment: steam, cargo, and waiting time, until the city as planned becomes a city as labor. So we descend from the made-up sky to Buffalo Bayou itself, where an 1873 steamboat scene shows what the map could only imply. The second image pulls you down to river level. Buffalo Bayou in 1873, with a steamboat tight to a landing. Unlike the panoramic map, this scene is intimate and practical. It is the kind of view often circulated through illustrated newspapers as an engraving, pictures that translated distant places into shared, believable moments. Here, the bayou is not romantic water. It is Houston's working roadway. A shallow, winding channel demands vessels built for frequent stops and quick transfers, and the boat's posture, near shore, ready to load, suggests routine commerce rather than a single dramatic event.
Next bale coming over, watch your step there.
The shoreline reads like a temporary warehouse. Goods stack close to the edge because every extra step costs time. Men gather where water meets planks and dirt, forming a human hinge between boat and town. Even when details blur, the logic is clear. Cargo comes off the vessel, gets sorted, and moves onward by wagon and street. In the 1870s, that mattered because Houston's trade still depended on what the Bayou could carry and when it could carry it. High water might speed movement, low water might delay it. Storms could turn the banks into mud. The engraving captures that constant negotiation between nature and schedule. Steam and smoke signal industrial rhythm. But the narrow waterway hints at limits that merchants would feel in every slow turnaround. Engraved press images carry their own kind of truth. They were commonly cut for printing from sketches and reports, so they simplify and sometimes dramatize, but they preserve what mattered to readers. The bayou lined with work, the vessel as a floating warehouse, and the landing as a choke point where the city's tempo could stall. In 1873, deep-water shipping from the Gulf was still an aspiration. The Houston Ship Channel would not open until 1914. That makes the scene feel urgent. Smoke, whistles, hands on ropes, and cargo that must move before the water or weather changes. Scenes like this evoke Houston's early landings, places such as Allen's Landing, where river traffic met the town and set its daily pace. Seen after the bird's eye lithograph, the steamboat scene becomes the map's missing soundtrack. The grid promised order, the bayou delivers friction. You can imagine the creak of lines, the thud of barrels, the shouted counts, and the impatient pause of a crew waiting for clearance. You can also sense why Houston's leaders and traders would push for stronger infrastructure over time. Sturdier landings, clearer routes, and eventually deeper channels that could handle more than shallow draft traffic. But before any grand engineering, the city had to solve a quieter problem: how to describe itself precisely enough to plan, tax, and build. Once you care where each load goes, which street reaches which landing, and who controls which strip of bank, the story shifts from spectacle to paper. The next artifact follows that shift, an 1873 sketched map that tries to hold Houston still long enough to draw it. After the sky view and the waterfront, the third artifact feels almost like a secret. A City of Houston sketched map dated 1873, preserved as an archival item rather than a poster for display. A sketch map does not try to impress strangers. It exists because a city is growing faster than memory can manage. By the 1870s, Houston had to coordinate streets, land parcels, access to the bayou, and the approaches to rail corridors that were reshaping trade. In that situation, lines on paper become power. They turn over there by the water into a boundary you can tax, a route you can improve, a corner you can sell, or a claim you can dispute.
The boundary must follow the high water mark precisely.
The historical value of a sketched map is its purpose. It is built to be used, carried into offices, marked up, corrected, and redrawn as new information arrives. Where a panoramic lithograph performs confidence, a sketch admits uncertainty, an erased line, a sharper corner, a note that something is planned but not finished. That admission is honest because cities are arguments in motion. A working map is how those arguments become decisions. Where a street truly runs, how blocks connect, what counts as the city's edge, and which paths matter most for moving goods to a landing. Even if the drawing is plain, it can preserve relationships that later photographs miss, especially once construction and rebuilding overwrite early alignments. Because it survives as a cataloged archival piece, the map also tells a story about evidence. It was kept, filed, and later preserved because someone considered it worth saving, even if it was never meant for public sale. Archives often restrict direct viewing of such items until a request is made, which can make the document feel elusive. But that elusiveness is part of its authenticity. It belongs to the working record of the city, the kind of paper a clerk, surveyor, or researcher would consult when a question needed a precise answer. In reconstruction work, these unglamorous sheets are gold. They anchor camera moves to real intersections, confirm how a block relates to the Bayou, and prevent modern imagination from sliding streets into the wrong places. A city in pencil, mid-thought still. Placed beside the other two images, the sketch map becomes the hinge that makes them one story. The bird's eye view tells outsiders, Houston is orderly and expandable. The steamboat scene shows insiders the daily friction that order must survive. Ropes, mud, shallow water, and impatient schedules. The sketch answers both worlds with a tool. It converts ambition and labor into administration, into streets that can be named, blocks that can be counted, and waterfront access that can be regulated. In that conversion, Houston stops being only a scene and becomes a system that can accelerate. You began above the city, then stood at the Bayou, and now you are at a desk where someone tried to hold Houston still long enough to draw it, so the next wave of change could be built on top of the lines.